I'm back because what once was will be again. I got my thinking cap on because we are going to wrap up this discussion about season 6, episode 8. And as much as a lot of people didn't like it, I liked it because it's really setting up the next action and it's going in the motions that I thought was going to happen. And in this case, we're going to talk about Cersei chooses violence. Well, really, the High Sparro chose violence as well. So you see that Cersei receives a quote-unquote invitation from the High Sparrow to come and visit him. And he sent his 7 little militant sparrows to go enforce his edict. And Cersei, of course, refuses because she understands exactly what this is. This is no invitation. This is a demand and a command for her to appear before the High Sparrow as if he was a power above her. And in reality, we probably feel the cringeworthiness of this whole concept as well. But she says, I choose violence. They say, there might be violence. She says, yeah, I choose violence. And the mountain rips the dude's head off. Well, this clearly shows to the sparrow exactly what the situation is. But maybe he even maneuvered her into this situation to show what this was going to be like, to know what it was going to be like, so that he could convince Tommen, which he did, to issue an edict that trial by combat was going to be outlawed. And you can see what it is. It not only takes away her ace in the hole, because she had the mountain and there really was nobody who could beat her, but think about all the other nobles in the land. Because back in the day, those were the people who could use trial by combat to their advantage. Because really, did God support the righteous and that would be who won? No, it was the dude who fought best and/or had the best fighter to support him. So the sparrow outmaneuvers Cersei and he puts her in a corner. And to quote Patrick Swayze, never put Cersei in a corner. It is a bad thing. But really the other thing that we have to look at here, because it says what's going to happen. It is totally setting up what's going to happen. And I talked about it in How the Sparrow Falls. And that is, first of all, you see the church usurping the power of the state. And this is why we cringe, because in our world, or at least in the Western world, the idea that the church has some power inside the state to make the state act a certain way, and or has usurped the power, such as being the judicial system, because that's what we see here. It's becoming the justice system. And it has no checks and balances on it any more than a system defined, and operated by a state that has no checks and balances on it either. So the church is no better, really, than a state without a check and balance. And we see also that the sparrow has been using his political persuasion with Tommen since Tommen issued this edict, and that's just one of many things. So the sparrow, in some respects, has been using limited force to enforce his edicts or his desires and demands, but also using political persuasion and persuasion with the masses. It's not all about force yet. And that's a yet. Because I believe what we're going to see is Cersei come out of her corner with a Thomas a Becket and Henry II moment. So you have to know in history who Thomas a Becket was. He was the Archbishop Bishop of Canterbury, and he was an advisor to Henry II. And he was constantly advising Henry II about how he believed government should operate in terms of moral values and what actions it should or should not take based on moral grounds. Whereas Henry II was very much a guy who was, the ends justify the means. And he was the absolute king. And his idea was he operated absolute power. And that if it wasn't seen that he used absolute power or he had the absolute power to enact his rule, that people would believe he would be weak and then he would be constantly under attack or his rule would be threatened. Now, and it's one thing to have the church advising you, but it's another where the church is trying to directly impact your way of governing. At the same time, the Archbishop of Canterbury felt that Henry II was trying to interfere in the affairs of the church. And he wanted to be able to appoint the other archbishops and or important cardinals, and the church felt that this was some serious interference in their domain. Obviously, they did not see the irony of their interference in the state, and the state wanting to, and not wanting to have the state interfere with their operations. So both of these were, while they had been friends to a degree, and he had given some good advice to Henry II, they continued to be at loggerheads. And it came to a point one day where Henry II was so angry and felt that the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas of Becket, had gone so far and possibly was fomenting rebellion that he just hammered his fist on the desk and said, "Will nobody rid me of this troublesome priest?" And two of his men took him up on it, went over to the cathedral and slew Thomas of Becket in front of the altar. So I see that this might be what happens with Cersei. That she's just going to be like, we need to get rid of this guy. That is it. And possibly it's the mountain that goes over there and does it. And this is when we get to that moment of what the transition of the church is. Please go check out How the Sparrow Falls, because it has a much more detailed explanation of how these things work. But essentially, since the Sparrow was the one using the limited force along with the political persuasion, when he's gone, there will no longer be political persuasion, because who's left in the church that can come up and do that and has that power? So it will resort back to the power that it does have. And the power that it does have right at this moment is the power of force and the power of the people. So we are going to see possibly where this turns into a riot and we get the mad Cersei burn them all. Burn them all concept, in which everybody, I think, believes that's going to happen. But we believe so many things. Who knows? But this is the transition for the church. It will become more violent. I believe Lancel will come to the head, and that we will get Torquemada and the Inquisition. I believe that Tommen is the Valonqar, because either when all things go to hell, or when he finds out the reason why Cersei has been resisting, i.e., he is not Robert Baratheon's son, and he's a child of incest, that he might just, like, strangle the crap out of her. Of course, we could see that she sees him as finally putting the nail in her coffin, and angrily she destroys him in a Medea moment. And you have to look up Medea, and I don't mean a mad black woman. I mean the mad wife of Jason the Argonaut, who, after he essentially leaves her, she stabs their children to death. And Cersei isn't quite Medea, but she is. She's playing Medea. She's pretty much ended up being the cause of death for all of her children, right? Whether she did it personally or not. Okay, so the High Sparrow falls, and the Inquisition comes, and Lancel comes to the seat of power in the church. That's what I believe we're going to see. What I believe I see for the mountain, well, the mountains, when the mountains blow in the wind like leaves. And we can see that the prophecies that we've seen all along have had multiple different meanings. It's not just, for instance, the mountains blowing in the wind like leaves is kind of like the Dothraki, because they're the mountains. And now they're let loose across Essos. But also, it brought to mind the reminder that all sins come back to haunt our characters. And that I said in another video that the mountain was Cersei's Frankenstein. And we know that Gregor Clegane, when he was still Gregor Clegane, was still an evil, psychopathic, sociopathic dude. He stuck Sandor Clegane's face in the fire. So what I expect to see is at some point we are going to see the mountain burn. The mountain's going to burn, because also that's Frankenstein. So you ever read the end of Frankenstein or watch any Frankenstein movie, the pitchforks and the torches are out, and Frankenstein dies, even though it's technically his master that is the result. He's going to be one of the first that goes. So, no Clegane Bowl. I just don't see that happening. Thank you very much. Tell me what you think. Hit the like button. I'll talk to you later.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.